Hello, and welcome to Reject Modernity, Embrace Tradition, the show where we take you back to the good old days, just probably not exactly how you expect from our title. I am Clayton Becker.
And I am Megan Cox.
It's been a few weeks since we talked to you. The primary reason for this is that Megan had her prospectus defense happening. If you're not in the academic community, if you don't know about how PhDs work, this is a big milestone that you need to pass in order to end up finishing the program. So
to get a PhD, this is essential.
Although you cannot physically be cheering for Megan in a way that we will hear you, we both assume that your well wishes, your congratulations are headed her way. But now that is done, hopefully we'll be a bit back more on our regularly scheduled programming of every other week. But with that in mind, with that gap that we've been talking about, with Megan's scientific progress coming out here, Megan, what are we going to be talking about today?
So we are talking about a little bit of science, though not necessarily completely of the political variety. Today, Clayton, we are going to be rejecting medical misinformation and embracing modern science.
Wow, crazy.
I know.
I mean, we're saying we're embracing modern science here, but really, I think we're just sort of embracing science more generally a bit.
The concept of science, scientific inquiry. Yeah.
Yes, we're embracing like medical science, embracing, vaccines generally, that kind of thing. The medical misinformation is what's really sort of the now in vogue thing for people to be doing.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been saying for a long time, we are pro pasteurization. We like our vaccines. And so I don't think it should be really all that surprising that we're coming out in favor of medical science. The thing that I think is really going to be a little jarring, surprising for our listeners is how much I'm going to tell you the boomers got it right in this episode. But, every once in a while, you got to hand it to them. And on this occasion, you do got to hand it to them.
I mean, broken clocks and being right twice a day and whatnot. One might say that a correct clock is right all the time, right? And that's us. We are the correct clock, and we're never wrong.
Clock, we are always right
about anything.
Oh dear. We're setting ourselves up for that right there. That's dangerous.
Those who are doing the medical misinformation, perhaps to really torture the metaphor, they're not a broken clock. They're just a clock that's offset by half an hour and so is never right. You know what I mean? But with that tortured metaphor out there, let's get into it. What kinds of medical information are we talking about? What exactly is the sort of motivating case here?
So today, the thing that I really want to talk about in a specific instance is medical misinformation about birth control. I don't know if this has percolated on your social media feeds. I assume I am more the target audience for something like this.
I do imagine that you are more the target audience for misinformation about birth control.
Exactly what I suspected, but there is a subtle push to get women to reject hormonal birth control, especially the hormonal birth control pill.
Okay.
I'm seeing a surprising number of similarly worded posts warning women that the pharmaceutical industry is plotting to make them even sicker and more dependent on pharmaceuticals in the future. So since I assume you haven't seen much of this, I assume that maybe 50% of our listeners haven't seen much of this. Would you like me to take you through some of these posts?
Take me through a little bit of
Okay.
Give me a brief syllabus here.
A brief syllabus. There are a couple of different varieties that I have been seeing all over the place, and I'll tell you what they are, and then I would like to go through what they're doing one by one. So the two major species of this are a absolutely consistently worded post. Like it's the same text. Quote, I'm sure it's just a coincidence that birth control pills were given out like candy to millennial teens, and now IVF is over a $30 billion market.
Okay, so two things there, just real quick, if I may. One, I don't remember birth control being handed out like candy to people in my cohort. A little younger than your cohort, but is this something that actually happened? First thing?
I don't remember it like that. I do remember a lot of people were prescribed birth control pills for reasons other than primarily birth control. For example, did you know anyone who took Accutane for acne?
Yeah, and you can't be on birth control if you're taking Accutane, right?
Other way around. You have to be on birth
control.
You must be on birth control because the incidence of birth defects, if you were to get pregnant while taking Accutane, were so high and so severe. You needed to be on birth control to be on Accutane. Was my recollection of how that went. This was also the time, at least for my cohort, where it was being prescribed not necessarily, again, for the purposes of preventing pregnancy, but it was starting to be prescribed for other hormonal or gynecological reasons, reducing period pain, as a primary, let's try to alleviate PMDD, which is a more severe form of premenstrual syndrome, things like that. So you're definitely seeing it be prescribed. It was not available in vending machines. I don't know what we're talking about there. Now, for sure, I remember bowls of condoms everywhere, but not at my high school, we were Catholic school, but there was definitely a lot of, discussion around safer sex, preventing teen pregnancy, et cetera.
I mean, I will say, I think that the bowls of condoms are still around. I've been TAing a course this year where the class meets on the Hill, which is, for those who aren't part of UCLA, which is where all the dorms are. And occasionally we have to go in through like residential life offices and all that kind of stuff. And I see they do have the big bowls of condoms.
All right, great.
All
right, good.
The second question I want to ask here is to the best of your knowledge, the people who make IVF stuff, are they the same people that make birth control stuff?
I don't particularly think so. Birth control is a pharmaceutical, and the people performing fertility medicine are doctors. I don't know. This is one thing I did not look up for this episode. I don't even think we have to get that far down the road, quite frankly, on interrogating this particular point. So that's example one is I'm sure it's just a coincidence that we gave out all this birth control and now all of these people are paying all of this money because they can't get pregnant.
People who are just asking questions.
Classic. The second one is the idea in some sort of phrasing, birth control pills are classified as a group 1 carcinogen by the World Health Organization, the same group as asbestos and tobacco.
That doesn't sound right to me.
So it is literally true, but is not true in the way that they want you to think. So we're going to come back to that. Remember that point. Let's talk first about the seeming coincidence of more people being on birth control pills and IVF being such a broad market right now. Okay. So as we do like to say here at Reject Modernity, Embrace Tradition, correlation is not causation. So just in the first place,
this is one of our favorite phrases here at Reject Modernity, Embrace Tradition. I'm pretty sure we came up with that. I don't think anyone else has said it
nobody else has come up with that. We're the first
people to realize this, actually. Anyway, go ahead and tell me.
I mean, so just at a baseline level, it's somebody throwing out two facts that are happening at the same time and saying, oh, look, these things are happening at the same time. They're probably related. No, not necessarily.
This is the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy.
Exactly.
After the fact, therefore, because of the fact.
That is exactly what's happening.
Sound premise.
Exactly. But to belabor this point even more, let's talk about all of the different reasons this could be wrong, just in terms of the logical fallacy, or, is your causal arrow actually doing what you think it's doing?
Yeah, we're about to talk to you guys about directed acyclic graphs. This is what you come to this show for.
Yeah. Also, like, God knows a non-visual medium is the place to talk about DAGs.
You can tell Megan and I have been like really wanting to do another episode for a while.
We have so many jokes saved up. We're just enjoying each other's company, and you guys get to be along for the ride. Okay, so IVF could be causing birth control use. And as I say that, you go, well, that doesn't make a ton of sense because the IVF is happening after the birth control use. If you know IVF is an option, you may choose to be on birth control for longer, not worried about your fertility. You have a kind of a safety net there.
Yes, you might, to put this in other terms, you might choose to postpone having children for longer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You might make the decision that I'm going to be on birth control longer, right? I'm going to like wait until I've, had 5 years at my job, right, before I take any maternity leave or whatever. And you're gonna do that because IVF is an option, right? Rather than, I need to use IVF because I was on birth control, right?
And that is the implication of the statement. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that birth control pills were given out like candy and now people are using IVF. The second option, the second alternative here is that IVF and birth control use could be completely unrelated. Just because two things happen to involve the uterus doesn't mean they are necessarily related. How many of these women who try IVF were using hormonal birth control? That's not in your cute little Instagram graphic, do you know? So there's that second option.
Especially to this point, since people keep talking about the birth control pill, right? We should note that there are other types of both hormonal and non-hormonal birth control. We've had copper IUDs for a very long time.
Which are not hormonal.
We've had hormonal IUDs for a long time. We've had things like NuvaRing. We've had like implants that go in your arms, right? Like
also barrier methods
have existed for a long time, right?
Yes, exactly.
There are several other types of birth control. In fact, those types have proliferated as IVF use has gotten more common, to the point where there are fewer people, as a fraction of the people who are on birth control, who are using that specific pill-based hormonal method.
Because it's a pain in the ass.
Hey, I wouldn't know, but I'll take your word for it.
You have to. So for those of you who don't know, if you're taking the birth control pill, you have to remember to take it every day, and you have to remember to take it at the same time every day. So it's obnoxious. So people, myself included, look at options where you set it and forget it, whether that is, the IUD or the implant, etc. That's a much easier format. That's a much easier way to do exactly the same thing. But anyway, third option, is it possible that the same thing is causing both the use of birth control pills and IVF at some point in a childbearing, existence? For sure, the same social or economic forces could be causing people to both use birth control in the pill form or other forms, and then to pursue IVF. Just as we were discussing about people delaying childbearing for their job, etc.
Yeah, well, this is like sort of I want to distinguish this one carefully from because of IVF, right? This is one where people are not doing this because they know IVF is an option, but are delaying having children because of some other reason, right? The male loneliness epidemic, women not being able to find a suitable partner because skill issue from men. We've talked about this in the past.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
The couple of episodes we did on this.
Yeah.
If you really want to look at a YouTube comment section that really proves the thesis of the video, the comment section on the YouTube version of this episode, the episode where we did Reject the Manosphere, it'll give you some information. Or, because they can't afford a large enough home to have a family, right? Housing prices, we've talked about that in the past. There are various different things that could be going on here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd also like to posit perhaps a fourth reason why this might be happening, why these things might be correlated but not causally related. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Megan, but IVF has only really been an option for the last 20 years or so, right? Like, in vitro fertilization is a relatively new technology at scale, right?
At scale, sure. Like, it has existed since the 70s, but yes, like, this is something that has been accessible in the more recent past. You know, yeah, more and more people are using it, to the extent that this is a, you know, people are noticing an upward trend. They're not wrong. I also think there would be a certain amount of, you know, it's newly discussed. You know, it's a lot more normal for people to talk about their infertility.
To this point, though, I mean, and again, like, maybe I'm just getting this wrong because I don't know of all of the advances in medical science, but like, solar panels have existed since the 1970s,
That's
right?
That's also true.
And yet solar panels are much less costly, much more efficient. The solar panels we have today are better than the solar panels we had in the 1970s, right? My assumption has been that the IVF technology we have today is better than the IVF technology we had in the 1970s.
Yes.
And so not only are more people using it, and that's why it might be more accessible, but the like actual technology is better, and so it works for more people. Right. Yeah. And so that might be a reason why you get hormonal birth control and then you get IVF. But really, the increase in IVF isn't because people's fertility is being wrecked. It's just because the IVF technology is better.
And there are other reasons why people might want to pursue it. Such as, and I mean, I think this is something that gets a really bad rap, you know, about like designer test tube babies. But if you know that you have like a genetic predisposition towards breast cancer, genetic testing of embryos is not a terrible idea to make sure that your future child does not die in their 20s of breast cancer.
Yeah, it's not at least genetically predisposed to one of the worst kinds of breast cancer. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I think at this point, like, maybe it's a good part for us to mention that, like, both of us, I think, are very broadly, like, extremely pro-children. Right? Like, we are very much like in the camp of like people should have as many children as they want and that should be possible for them, right? Like, we're not people who are like, you know, it is morally unethical to bring a child into the world. Like, you can't, like, the child has no say in like being born, and so it's inherently unethical to have children. We're not like that kind of like no one should have kids kind of leftists, right? Like, those people who exist, we are not them.
We are not them. We are not them. No, but
you can go into our back. You can go into our back catalog, right? Like, we're not making this up for this episode. Megan has said this several times, right?
Yes. As somebody who may be availing herself of IVF in the near future, like, I'm well aware of like the costs and risks and benefits here. But anyway, the point of this is, first of all, just spurious. Like, this is being presented as this, as you said, just kind of a just asking questions, sort of tongue-in-cheek, oh, look at this kind of point. And I will tell you, when I saw this one, I immediately was reminded of the same sort of campaign against vaccines that we have seen. This really looks like a vaccine panic. And concerns about vaccines were popularized by parents of vaccine-injured children. The arguments that they made, however, outside of their own cases were, and even inside their own cases, they were largely correlational.
To be clear, vaccine-injured children is in quotes in the little notes that Megan wrote up, right? Like, To be clear, right? To be clear. And I mean, I'm sure, like, to take this as kind of a compassionate perspective, I'm sure it's very difficult to be kind of like looking inside of yourself, trying to figure out what you did, quote unquote, to wind up with a child who is severely autistic. Speaking from my family's experience, my mom is deeply offended by the entire concept of being anti-vax because of you having an autistic child, because my brother's on the autism spectrum, and she's like, I'm glad he's alive, thanks. I'm really glad he didn't die of measles, sort of thing. It's a series of correlations that are being made where you have an increase in vaccines being given at the time of life when a child would first be showing signs of developmental delays.
Again, it's great that kids aren't getting measles. Like, that's really good. I was, just complete side note, I was thinking about this in the case of my brother who, we were kids before there was a chickenpox vaccine. And Jeff got chickenpox and got pneumonia, and I think he had to go to the hospital for that. And I'm like, this kid would have died if he got the measles. Like, he's probably alive because of the MMR vaccine. Like, come on, give me a break. But anyway, so you have kids getting vaccines at a time when they would be experiencing that onset. If they have autism or an autism spectrum disorder, that's when they're going to be demonstrating it. Additionally, you have much more diagnosis in the population. Furthermore, even more recently, you've got that, again, increase in the vaccine schedule, but also you have the elimination of Asperger's syndrome as an independent diagnosis, and you have an increase in the number of people who are being diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder as a result. So it looks like numbers go up. It looks like the numbers just both are going up at the same time. It's entirely correlational, which is the same argument that is being made with this birth control pills and IVF argument.
It really is sort of exactly the same thing, right? And like it has, I would argue, exactly the same level of scientific basis behind it, in that there is no scientific basis for either.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure most of our listeners are probably aware of this, but if you're like just encountering this podcast for the first time, it's important to note that the like first study to ever like observe this correlation, like say that there was some sort of like vaccine injury that caused autism, was retracted by the journal that it was originally published in. There's a whole series of stories about the like actual medical fraud that went into publishing the paper in the first place.
I got down such a damn rabbit hole on this point. But like, even if Andrew Wakefield hadn't been fucking making it up in that Lancet article, it still would have been atrocious.
Yeah. So it was bad. It was bad science, even if he hadn't been lying. But then, second, he was in fact lying about.
He was in fact lying. They went back and checked with the patients and their parents, and they're like, "No, that's not what we told him."
Deliberately faked data, and then also I should note, like, we'll stop with the rabbit hole after this point.
Yeah.
But like the original study is of like 12 children, right? Like,
yeah, selected on the dependent variable.
Yeah, by which Megan means they recruited participants from groups of parents who were like
my kid has autism.
In nascent online communities saying my child has autism and it was because of the vaccine. And then he asked them, do you think your child got autism because of the vaccine? And the dependent variable was, did the parents report that they thought the vaccine was what caused their child's autism? That was the whole study. And many of the parents that he asked, that he reported as saying, I think my child has autism because of the vaccine, didn't in fact say that they thought their child had autism because of the vaccine. So it was atrocious study design in the first place. No fucking clue how it got published in a journal like The Lancet. And then second, he made up a bunch of the data. Anyway.
Okay. But the point and why we're getting so worked up about this is the similarities between that panic and what we're seeing now. It's like we're catching this at the very beginning. Like, it's exactly. 1984 for the anti-vax movement. That's about where we are, and not in terms of like, a George Orwell reference. Like, that's the period in time that we're talking about. So a couple of other points I want to make about this first kind of species of anti-birth control social media. I'm going to call it propaganda because I think that's what it is. So we're definitely selecting on the dependent variable again, because we're not talking about the innumerable women who were taking the birth control pill and were able to conceive a child without IVF. We're not talking about those people. Also, I had a moment this afternoon where I thought to myself, is $30 billion even right? And then I thought, you know what? It does not really matter if they're overstating the industry. And here's why. I'm going to tell you because I did some math. So let's say 30 billion is correct. IVF cycles cost about $10,000 per cycle. And when I say cycle, I mean giving yourself hormones, the egg retrieval, the mixing together of the egg and the sperm, and then the reintroduction of that embryo into the uterus. Mm-hmm. That process costs 10 grand. So if the industry is $30 billion, that's 3 million cycles. Approximately 3 million babies were born in the United States last year, but that 30 billion number isn't specific to the United States. Last year in the world, 132 million children were born. So that's maybe 2% of the world's children being conceived through IVF, assuming that every cycle results in a live birth, which they don't.
Which it doesn't, yeah.
We are also assuming that everyone who is using IVF because they couldn't conceive naturally. Is that true, or is that even true in the way that they mean it? That leaves out LGBTQ couples. That also leaves out women who are choosing to undergo IVF without a partner.
Yeah. We know someone who recently did that.
Oh, yeah. 2 people. I know 2 people who are doing that. So yeah, absolutely. So is that like, oh my God, $30 billion, that's so big, that's such a big deal. Okay, relative to the population, is it?
I don't think it's actually that big. I think, like, if I'm remembering correctly, I'm gonna just check this really quick. But if I'm remembering correctly, Americans spend more than that on like pet food every year. Pet food spending, United States. I'm gonna check this. Yeah, by 2021, I don't know exactly what it is today. Just looking at the first Bureau of Labor Statistics result that came up at the end of 2021, the figure of pet expenditures had climbed to $102.8 billion. So even assuming that $30 billion is correct for IVF, Americans spend more than 3 times that just on our pets every single year. Not that big a number, actually.
Okay. All right. Like, it seems like a big number. You look at it and you're like, $30 billion. It's not for something like on the scale that we're discussing, which is like the global population. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's the $30 billion IVF industry and birth control pills. You want to talk about the cancer thing?
Yeah. What the hell is up with that?
Okay. Well, I think you're having the same reaction they want you to have, because I don't think you know how carcinogens are classified. I also did not know how carcinogens are classified.
Are they like classifying like the active ingredient in it as a carcinogen, but it's like it's only a carcinogen if you take 30 times the amount of like the recommended dose?
It's so much dumber than that.
Oh my God. Okay, let me hear it.
Carcinogen classification by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the WHO, that part is right. They classify carcinogens by the strength of the evidence that they cause cancer, not by the actual risk posed by the substance.
What?
So
you're going to have to elaborate upon that for me.
Okay. So if we are 95% sure that 2% of people who encounter a substance will get cancer from that substance, it will be classified in the same category as tobacco, where way more than 2% of the people who encounter it are getting cancer.
I see. So if it's like an extremely mild carcinogen, and that basically
we're
really sure, like ham, right? Like deli meats we're really sure are a carcinogen, right? So that's also a group 1 carcinogen in the same category as tobacco. That is a really dumb way of categorizing these substances.
Right? For this reason. And again, science communication is really hard. Like, no judgment. I'm not throwing shade. It's very hard.
I'm throwing a tiny bit of shade.
Okay. That is not a helpful way to classify carcinogens to the general public.
No, it's not.
For exactly this reason. So To back up a little bit here, IARC does consider the combined progesterone and estrogen pill to have a proven relationship with some forms of cancer. It has done so since 2005. This is not new information. Interestingly, while it increases the risk of breast cancer and cervical cancer, and really quick, I want to ask if the increase of cervical cancer is possibly because you're not then using a barrier method and you're getting HPV. So it increases the risk of breast and cervical cancer, but it decreases the risk of endometrial cancer as well as colon and bowel cancer. So a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. So there's that. But the implication, because most people don't know how cancer or how carcinogens are classified. You are supposed to look at that graphic that says that this thing is as carcinogenic as tobacco or asbestos and think that the risk is the same.
You're supposed to totally freak out.
Yeah, obviously. This is supposed to freak you out. And it's bullshit. So we've got all that. So we already have people freaking out about the birth rate, some of which may be justified because we have set up our society such that we need younger people to pay for older people to live. But now we've got this kind of concerted effort of targeting birth control. And this is the part where I'm going to sound like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. But what do you think that's about?
I mean, what it seems to come down to is people whose like solution to like fertility problems and people not having as many children is rather than like, and I think this is a good point to note that like people who are having fewer children are not like, they're often not having fewer children like because they just want fewer children, but because of the sorts of like economic headwinds and things we were talking about earlier. Like if you ask people about the number of children they want, they will often say a higher number of children than they actually have, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There are, despite the prevalence of the narrative, right, there are fewer people out there who have more children than they want than have fewer children than they want, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I said that backwards. There are fewer people who want more children.
There are fewer people who regret the number of children they have.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Most people wish they had another child.
Yes.
Or more people wish they had another child. Yeah.
More people wish they had more children than wish they had fewer children. There we go.
There we go.
Finally got the fewer more thing right. There we go. But so
see, this is like, what happens when we take a month off, man.
Really
Come on.
But I think like people's solution to that problem is rather than make it easier to have kids, right? Like provide additional state support for child rearing, build more affordable housing so people feel like they can afford the size of space, right? Yada, yada, yada. Like we could take this apart 6 ways from Sunday. Rather than do any of those things, which are hard and complicated, they want to remove the ability for women to control their fertility so that people just end up having more kids, whether they want them or not.
Yeah. This is immiserating women is the plan.
And I don't know about you, Megan, but that seems to be a rather suboptimal way of handling this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I am distressed, and I think, you've given actually the less nefarious version of what may be going on. I think this is an occasion on which the small state, let's not create a big welfare safety net folks and the manosphere folks are quite aligned. And also the conservative Christians are also in that coalition. This is the thing that brings the coalition back together on the right side of the equation. And I do think it is a little bit about the deliberate subjugation of women, pulling women out of the workforce, pulling women back into the home.
And I'll note on this, right? Like the messaging that gets targeted at women about this is very different from the messaging that gets targeted at men. The messaging that gets targeted at men is sort of the kinds of things that Megan has been talking about thus far. Like women should obey their husbands, a woman's place is in the home, you should be the provider, like it's the nefarious pharmaceutical companies that are taking away your potential wife's ability to give you children, right? The messaging that gets targeted at women is much more like from conservative women themselves. And it sounds something a little bit like this. When I stopped going to work every single day, when I dropped out of the rat race, when I embraced my divine feminine and decided to spend time at home and having children, I just immediately felt so much more fulfilled with my life. I felt so much more relaxed, and I just felt like this was my purpose. This was what I was put on earth to do. That is the kind of messaging that gets targeted at women, and I would argue probably does convince women who are not particularly clued into the like subtext of that statement, right? That they should seek out a man who will in fact handle all of the other details, right?
And we've got, again, back to your point, we've got a society where, the rat race does suck. Totally. Completely agree. Capitalism is the fucking worst, man. But
I think like wasn't an episode like 4 or 5 that we did that was like reject hustle culture, right? Like we've been on this train for a while.
It's awful, but the only place that a lot of, I think, especially women feel that they can direct that frustration is dropping out. I'm just going to be a homemaker. I'm just going to have babies. Rather than like trying to actually like create the social structure or the welfare state to make things less miserable, we are just taking care of ourselves, removing ourselves from the situation to a degree that creates the same problems that our mothers and grandmothers fought to escape.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into a super long discussion about like choice feminism versus like more radical feminism or whatever on this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are women for whom like that is the thing they want to do, and like again, there are drawbacks to like, well, just let women have choices, right? Oftentimes women making choices that hold other women back is a problem, yada yada, right? We don't need to like get into another 40 minutes.
We're good.
Yeah. But I think that there is a degree to which like, you need to like allow for multiple different paths. And right now, the way that the messaging is going, the way that like the people who are actually sort of behind the politics piece of this movement, if we can call it that, are trying to limit the choices for women, regardless of whether there are women who would make that choice of their own volition in a perfect world where they do have options. The people who are behind this movement are trying to make those the only options.
Exactly. And that's why we really don't need to get into a debate about choice feminism, because I think if that's the choice that you want to make, I think it's ill-advised, but sure, fine, go with God, whatever. However, this propaganda is creating the permission structure to remove the choices from other women. You're never going to take away birth control with no female support. This is expanding the coalition of women who would support that. That's the intention of this. It's to say, okay, we got, the science wasn't there. The evil pharmaceutical companies got too far over their skis. They've been colluding with doctors to make women sicker, to increase their profits. And so now we need to roll that back. That's where they're trying to expand the coalition. And this is the part that feels tinfoil hatty to me, but I don't think it's wrong. That's the thing that we actually need to be worried about. So I think we should take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the way that science is actually getting things right. And we're going to talk a little bit about policy solutions to head this off at the pass and what we can do individually just to be more aware of this sort of messaging going forward.
Welcome back, everyone, to Reject Modernity, Embrace Tradition. When we left you, we were trying to convince you we weren't wearing tinfoil hats. Now that we're back, we're going to talk about the ways in which science is, in fact, actually getting things right, talk about some policy solutions. But we do want to start, I think, with like an acknowledgement that like science isn't perfect, right? Like there are justifiable concerns, and we're not trying to address those here. we're trying to address the stuff that we talked about in the front half. The actively nefarious, actively misinforming people.
I think, and that's one of the reasons that misinformation lands, especially medical misinformation, lands so well with so many people, is we've all had our issues with one doctor or another at some point. And I think surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, this really seems to come up very often in the gynecological setting. And so it rings true to a lot of people, like, oh yeah, they weren't telling me everything. They didn't tell me that this was, or they told me this was not going to be a problem, and it turned out to be a side effect that was a real pain. So I understand where people are coming from. However, not unlike that carcinogen classification scheme that we just talked about, I think it's helpful to actually know a little bit more about what's going on in medical ethics, in scientific testing, before you jump to conclusions on the basis of a pretty Instagram infographic. So let's talk really quick about, because this IVF and birth control spurious correlation thing, to the extent that a correlation exists at all, I think we're not really, understanding the medical testing process in the first place, and then what it takes to be a side effect or to be listed as a side effect for different types of medication. Just basic facts. When a new pharmaceutical is going to be introduced to the public, the median number of people in a medical trial, in a test, is 1,700 people. For a rare disease drug where it's harder to find people who have the particular issue that your drug is attempting to treat, it's about 430. But I guarantee you birth control is in the higher category.
Yes. Pregnancy is in fact an affliction that may affect more people.
Many of us. Is there a placebo or is there not a placebo? Are you testing against something else? This is something especially that comes up during discussions about anti-vax, like, oh, it wasn't tested against a placebo. So in general, it is not ethical to use placebos in tests where there is a proven treatment that exists for a life-threatening condition. So again, back to measles and MMR. Measles can kill you. The MMR vaccine is proven to work at preventing people from contracting measles. It is also proven to reduce severity. So when you're testing a new formulation of the measles vaccine, it is unethical to ask patients to be injected with saline and not build antibodies to measles, and potentially die of measles exposure.
Yeah, it's especially since in these randomized controlled trials, you usually don't know which thing you are getting, right?
That's the point, yes.
Yeah, it's a patient blind study, right? Mm-hmm. Many of these medical studies are double blind studies, which mm-hmm. means that not even the people who are doing the research, doing the actual enumeration, like doing the injecting, right, know exactly which one they're injecting it with. There's a separate ID that's only like revealed later, right, mm-hmm. where it's like, oh, mm-hmm. vial 56 did in fact contain the new formulation, right? Mm-hmm. And that's to intentionally avoid things like p-hacking or, mm-hmm. Like stacking the deck in your favor, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's unethical to tell people, well, you're in this trial for this drug that could save your life from this condition, right? There's a treatment out there. We're not going to give you that, right? You're either going to get the thing that works or nothing, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. It's not ethical for patients to not know, right? That like they actually do not have the protection against the mm-hmm. thing, right? Especially, mm-hmm. as Megan said, when an actual treatment exists. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
exactly.
we know, right? Like, treatments, right? A birth control pill does in fact exist, right? So mm-hmm. you mm-hmm. can enroll people into a trial where you say, well, you're going to take these sugar pills or you're going to take whatever, but pregnancy is also, in fact, for some women, life-threatening.
Life-threatening, right? Yeah. I don't, it's funny. I should have kind of interrogated this a little bit further. It's like in a trial for birth control pills, do they just tell everyone in the trial also use a barrier method? Because then you're not realizing how effective the pill is. Control, yeah, you're only realizing whether there are side effects. Speaking of side effects, The threshold for listing something as a side effect, in general, is if 1 person in 100 in the testing population experiences a side effect, it's going to be listed. A rare and severe side effect, like anaphylaxis, for example, or a heart attack or stroke, may be listed if only 1 incident occurs over the whole 1,000 plus almost 2,000 people in the average trial. So have you seen that video of like the boyfriends reading the pamphlet with all the different like side effects for their girlfriend's birth control?
I may have seen something like it.
They're unfolding it like it's a Cheesecake Factory menu. It's huge. And they're like, oh my God, you can get angina. What is that? That's a heart attack, sort of thing. Of course, you're going to list it. Additionally, it is unsurprising that drug companies want to be over-inclusive in the side effects, because as much as they want people to take their drugs, they really don't want to be sued by people who do take their drugs. And you need to prove that the warning was inaccurate if you want to sue a drug company. So if they tell you, hey, you could die in these ways, ye be warned.
Yeah. So I think to make it like really clear for people what Megan and I are saying here, we're not saying that these side effects aren't real, right? Like that they're not actual things that can happen as a result of taking the medication. But what we are saying is that the threshold for saying that they are a possible side effect is quite low.
Yes.
For a rare side effect like a severe allergic reaction, that's what anaphylaxis is, or a heart attack, if just one of those things occurs, right? Which ever in the trial, which again, correlation and causation, we're not even 100% sure that the cause is there.
Or even subsequently, once it's out in the population, if somebody's taking a medication and has a heart attack, there's an incentive to say that a possible side effect could be a heart attack.
Yes, exactly. And the main reason for the incentive is that people don't want to get sued. And then there are, of course, regulations around, like, if the side effect is plausible, you should list it. And also, of course, like there's good medical ethics there as well, right? Like you want people to be informed about the possibility.
Also, you want prescribers to be informed. If you have a doctor who may be prescribing a medication, you want them to be able to make that evaluation. So it makes sense. And I think we tend to hear that list of very scary sounding things and assume the risk is higher than it is, because we have discussed many, many times on this podcast, people are very bad at assessing risk.
Yeah. People are loss avoidant. They over index on bad things potentially happen.
Yeah. And people are like, I am more likely to be in a car accident than to be given a heart attack by my IUD.
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. You got into a car accident a couple of weeks ago. Wasn't Megan's fault. Was not Megan's fault.
Thank you. And we'll see what the insurance company says, but I maintain it was not my fault. And I have never been given a heart attack by my IUD. So, day ain't over yet, not that wood. But
again, correlation, not causation, but
so that's the science. That's the science about it. And I think it's super helpful when we encounter medical misinformation to actually try to find how these processes work. I know I personally, when I went to do some of the research for this episode, I was concerned about, am I actually going to find good information? How am I going to find good information? And so I think to a certain extent, people are a little bit concerned about even the concept of doing my own research, quote unquote. But if you're looking at places like the American Cancer Society, which is where I found the information about cancer and the birth control pill, you can be relatively sure that that is a reputable source. PubMed, despite our jumping up and down on the Lancet deciding to publish Andrew Wakefield's article, PubMed's pretty good. Peer-reviewed studies are probably the way to go here. Moon Goddess Divine is not the place to go. I mean, I'm sure she's got great thoughts.
But probably not the best resource for your medical information.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's the science.
That's the science. Like, this stuff is complicated, right? But pharmaceutical companies do actually do a substantial amount of clinical trials. it is rare. It is rare that something gets onto the market that is like genuinely hazardous to human health.
And we know about it. You think about something like thalidomide, that comes out, and it's a huge deal because it was such an acute fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, we're not saying that the medical establishment is perfect, right? We want to be very clear about that, right? But just because the medical establishment is not perfect does not mean that every last drawback that someone on Twitter or Instagram points to, that they make up, that they try to convince you of, is true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the science. What about the policy, Megan? How can we head this off at the pass?
So I do want to talk about like the concept of policy and when we should be regulating things and when we shouldn't. Among the things regulated, some of this testing is mandated in order for something to be available in any particular market. But if a medication isn't right for you, that doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be available to others. If you are deciding that you think the risk from birth control pills is too high, there's a big jump from thinking that about yourself to thinking that for everyone, for the entire population. As an example, sulfa drugs are a widely available alternative to penicillin. For people who are allergic to penicillin, it's also often one of the first things that doctors will go to for an antibiotic. My mom's side of the family is allergic to sulfa drugs. I have never taken a sulfa drug because I don't want to run the risk, and I'm not allergic to penicillin, so I don't really need to. I think that risk is high enough for me to not take that drug. That doesn't mean that sulfa shouldn't be available to the population.
What do you mean, Megan? If something's not right for you, then that means it shouldn't be available to anyone. We all
I know I am the paragon after which all are modeled. I'm the platonic ideal.
Know that our individual preferences should be the thing that is imposed upon everyone else, right? This is brand new information that you're telling me about. That people should have access to things I might not want for myself. You're telling me this for the first time.
Yeah, right. I feel the same way about marijuana. It's not for me, but I respect that it might be for some of you.
The next time we're at a social event, Megan, I'll bring something.
Oh, okay.
This is the peer pressure they warned you about.
Right.
A younger peer pressuring you into doing drugs with the cool kids.
Reefer madness right here. Okay.
So, just as you can really tell, guys, that Megan and I haven't had a chance to talk at length for a while. To this point, Andrea still refers to marijuana as reefer sometimes, which I think is really funny. She does it unironically. It's very funny.
I love it.
I'm like, are you a 75-year-old white man? Like,
that's so great. Oh my God. That's good stuff.
Anyway,
okay.
Back to the regularly scheduled programming.
So I also let's talk about side effects versus main effects. Okay, a side effect might be that you're going to need IVF when you decide you want to have kids in your late 30s. But the main effect of the availability of birth control that the ejaculator does not participate in using and may not even be aware of is women's safety, women's educational attainment, women's economic success. And so this is the part where we absolutely do have to hand it to the boomers. The idea that women should be able to access birth control that they themselves have control over is a huge deal. And it makes it much less likely that a child is going to come into a situation that is not prepared to receive it. That's really what it boils down to.
So I have two things I want to say there. First thing, I implore you not to use the word ejaculator again.
I want to be inclusive, Clayton.
Didn't like that. Fine. Second thing, I think I want to contextualize as well here, right? That let's assume, we were talking about this earlier, right? About 2% roughly of the births out there in the world, assuming that every IVF cycle results in a live birth, which it doesn't, right? Could potentially be attributed to IVF, right? That's the number we're working with, right? It might not be 100% accurate, but that's the number we're working with. let's assume again that like 100% of the people who are using IVF, again, not something that we think is true, but let's assume for the sake of argument that 100% of the people who are using IVF are using it because they used birth control, right? And they now need to use IVF to get pregnant later in life. There is a much larger number of people who do not need to use IVF to get pregnant later in life. There are lots of people, 98% of people, in fact, under this particular framework we've got going here, who are not using IVF in order to get pregnant. 2% feels like the very definition of a side effect to me.
Yeah.
Even assuming all of the misinformation is true, even assuming every single thing that we have just talked about for the last hour is right, and that we're wrong, it would be a nearly vanishingly rare side effect.
It is a side effect. In a population that huge, of course, it's going to be a big number of people if it's 2%. But the number of people who are able to use birth control without encountering this is probably significantly higher.
And of course, we're not even talking about the other medical effects of birth control that we mentioned earlier, right? People taking it to control PCOS, people taking it to control period pain, people taking it to control PMS, people taking it so that they can take other drugs that help them get rid of cystic acne, for example, right? Like all of these other benefits that this medicine has. And you're just going to say, no, too many women are having children using IVF, so got to kick it to the curb.
Yeah.
Not allowed.
I mean, the implication of the statement in the first place is it is negatively impacting fertility long term. I'm like, then say that and prove it. But again, that's not what they're doing. So they're, as we said before, laying the groundwork for policy that will remove the possibility that women can choose to use the birth control pill.
Yeah.
Or other hormonal birth control.
In the most steel manny version of their argument possible is that they think that and again, like this is assuming that everything that we have said is probably not true, is in fact true. The most like steel man version of their argument possible that we could possibly make is that they think that long-term declines in fertility as a result of the birth control pill are such a negative side effect that it outweighs everything else. That is like the best possible case scenario for their argument. And I don't know, I don't think that's right. I'm going to be so brave, and I'm going to say that that's probably incorrect.
Yeah. I think that you will have some company out there on that limb. It's a hazardous place, but I think many of us will join you out there. So that's the policy that is being proposed functionally, and that is the rationale for it. I've never been able to understand what anti-vaccine advocates are getting out of their crusade, so I've always kind of assumed it was misguided, but in good faith. I absolutely do understand what people are getting out of opposing birth control. If you have a problem with the main effects of birth control, which are women's educational attainment, women's economic success, and women's independence, I can totally see why you would have a problem with birth control. I suspect that many of the influencers who are peddling this message they may not believe, they may believe that birth control is harmful, not necessarily believing that women's educational attainment, et cetera, is bad. The people who are giving them their talking points, they may not believe that birth control is the medical problem, but they believe it is the social problem that needs to be resolved.
100%. 100%.
These people are so unconcerned to reap control.
They want, again, like tinfoil hat moment here, like they want to create a system in which, because of their lack of ability to control their fertility, women are once again dependent on men. That's what they want.
Yeah.
That's what they want. They want women to be unable to control their family structures and therefore be unable to participate as full equal members in society.
Yep. Pretty much.
Tinfoil
so
hat.
That sucks. But let's speak about how to oppose it from a policy standpoint.
Exactly.
I think it's interesting. As I was writing this, Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, introduced a bill that would ban mifepristone. So previously, something that was attempted was a judicial branch attempt, a court case saying that the FDA did not have the authority to approve mifepristone. And so that was some, agency law machination that didn't quite work. And so now there is an attempt to just say, like in law, oh, the FDA has this authority, the Administrative Procedures Act says all of these things. All of that notwithstanding, mifepristone can't be prescribed.
To be clear to the rest of our listeners who might not know what mifepristone is, it's a medication abortion pill.
Medication abortion.
Yeah.
So that's when I say they're creating a permission structure to ban a particular medication, that's the sort of direction things would have to go in order for the federal government to prohibit this sort of availability of a drug, like prescription birth control pills. But what I want to suggest to you is possibly the best thing that we can do on a policy level to try to avoid this sort of march towards, I don't even know what we're marching towards, a regression in women's autonomy, is state level constitutional amendments for medical autonomy.
Ooh, I think I know where you're going with this.
You know where I'm going with this? Wyoming. Wyoming is where I'm going with this.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. So the right to privacy in the federal constitution is a little kind of
amorphous. The Supreme Court used the word penumbra to describe where
it's a penumbra. What the fuck is a penumbra, you guys? So fortunately for us, we have 50 states in this great nation of ours, each of which has its own constitution. Many of those constitutions have more rights enumerated in them than our federal constitution does. Some examples are Montana having a specific right to privacy in its state constitution, and Wyoming having a right to medical decision making in its state constitution. Now, the Montana one, that's just a, leave me alone. I'm a, outdoorsy person who doesn't like people around kind of thing. The Wyoming one was specifically adopted. Do you remember the death panels, Clayton?
Yes, in response to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, Sarah Palin screaming about death panels on Fox News.
So there was a common refrain, again, not accurate, that first of all, that healthcare would be rationed under the Affordable Care Act, meaning people wouldn't be able to get the care that they thought that they were entitled to. And then from there, we got the concept of a quote unquote death panel where some board of hospital overseers would decide if your grandmother was allowed life-saving medical care or if she shouldn't be allowed it because she was old and she'd lived her life, et cetera.
Yes, a board of faceless hospital bureaucrats would sit atop their ivory tower and decide whether or not grandma's treatment could continue or whether she was costing too much money. And so Wyoming passes...
That's exactly what happens in insurance companies, whatever.
But, I mean, yes, it is kind of exactly what happens with private insurance. But anyway, neither here nor there. What Wyoming has here is they pass this constitutional amendment giving people a right to make medical decisions, right? rather than like hospitals or other people who might have some sort of like say in the process. And how this ends up playing out is that when Wyoming tries to ban abortion, there's a constitutional amendment that says, hey, they have a right to medical decision making.
And that so includes choosing to have an abortion.
Because as we have been over, abortion is healthcare, right? It is a medical procedure, it's a medical decision. And so courts in Wyoming were like, guys, it's in the fucking Constitution. And you can't, if you
can't do that.
Can't do that.
Can't do that.
Like, because it applies to other kinds of medical decisions, lawmakers aren't going to get rid of the like ability to make medical decisions writ large, just like
it's a bad look,
right? Yeah, pretty bad look. Voters probably wouldn't like it very much, right?
No.
And so having more of these kinds of things at the state level would be very helpful.
Yeah.
For trying to forestall the kind of stuff we're talking.
As we know, states can be laboratories for democracies, but they can also be laboratories against democracy. So I think it's unlikely that Josh Hawley's mifepristone ban gets cloture in the Senate. I also, I'm not 100% sure it passes even if they lower the threshold to 50 votes on that thing. I am rooting for my girl Lisa Murkowski on that one.
I also don't, frankly, know, it would be challenged in court under various constitutional rights. Good fucking luck, quite frankly, getting around Griswold v. Connecticut. I don't know, man.
There's a lot that has to be unwound to have that law upheld. The point here that we're saying is it's probably unlikely that a federal law banning prescription birth control pills will be passed and actually take effect. I think there's a possibility that states give this a shot because states have plenary authority. They have a bit more power. So to in advance say, we are going to enshrine a right to medical decision-making in our Constitution, I think that nips a lot of different things in the bud. Anti-trans legislation, anti-abortion legislation, and something like this. So that's the direction that I would take this. If you're looking for a place to advocate in your state and you don't live in Wyoming, this is the place to go.
Yeah, I think as we've talked about before, you can only really be effective on a couple of different things, right? You can't advocate on every single issue. But if none of the stuff we've talked about over the past 40 some episodes has really resonated with you as something to advocate for, if you think someone in your life would be someone who would want to advocate for this kind of thing, this would be a direction to go. This would be an area to put your efforts towards.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to talk about before we close things out, because we've been talking for an hour-ish.
A while.
Yeah. Haven't we? This is, again, you can tell we haven't done this in a bit. In terms of personal behavior, for those of us who use social media, I think it is really important to stop and think about why a thing suddenly becomes popular if you see it in multiple places. Just as an example, I remember a few years ago, there was this trend on TikTok, Instagram Reels, etc., of filming yourself running around like Jack Sparrow. And I remember it was completely random, out of left field, because the first Pirates movie had come out 15 years before this. It was just not related to anything, I thought, until a few months later, Johnny Depp's lawsuit against Amber Heard for defamation went to trial. Oh, this is trying to inculcate a certain amount of goodwill. Remember how much you like this character that Johnny Depp played? Isn't it delightful and lovable? And this harpy is accusing him of raping her or whatever. The actual details of the defamation case where I don't want to get into. But I don't know this for sure, but I really would bet good money that the social media trend was a campaign designed to build up that goodwill for him. It's not unlike pastel QAnon in that way, where you would see where are the children memes, bring them home, things that seem, I support that. I'm opposed to child trafficking without really realizing what is lying underneath is actually kind of nefarious. This message sounds like it's looking out for women's health and well-being, which I support. But if there were evidence to support the claims that they're making, they would be using it.
They would be.
These misleading and informationless claims serve a purpose. And let's be sure to remember who benefits if women relinquish control of their reproduction.
I think that's a good place as any to stop. Until we manage to do those things, until we put these medical liberty laws into state constitutions, until we sort of express skepticism, as we've talked about in previous episodes as well, of things we may see on the internet, until we recognize what is good about medical science. I have been Clayton Becker.
And I have been Megan Cox.
And we will see you guys on the next one.